What if I told you we have something like a photo album from 500 million years ago? I'm not talking about single-celled goo, I mean the first real animals. Well, we do, and today we're going to flip through the pages of this incredible geological snapshot, the Burgess Shale.
So, it all comes down to one of the biggest questions in all of science, right? Where did all the animals come from? I mean, for billions of years, life was, well, it was pretty simple, just microscopic stuff. And then, bam! In what's basically the blink of a geological eye, the world just filled up with all these complex, kind of bizarre, and absolutely wonderful creatures. So, what gives? How did that even happen?
Well, scientists have a name for it. They call it a biological Big Bang. And honestly, that's not an exaggeration. This single event has been a massive puzzle for, over a century now. It's truly one of the most dramatic, most mysterious chapters in the entire history of life on Earth.
It's called the Cambrian Explosion. And picture this, around 538 million years ago, the fossil record just goes crazy. It explodes with life. Almost every major blueprint for an animal, what scientists call a phylum, that exists today just pops into existence. We're talking arthropods, even our own very, very distant relatives. They all just show up seemingly out of nowhere in an impossibly short window of time. This wasn't some slow, meandering evolution. No, this was an absolute biological sprint.
Okay, so how on earth do we know all this? You'd think the answer would be in some fancy high-tech lab, right? Nope. The key to this whole mystery was found on a mountaintop, a really remote mountaintop, high up in the Canadian Rockies. And the crazy part? That mountaintop used to be the bottom of a warm tropical sea.
And this discovery wasn't a one-and-done thing. It started back in 1907 with a guy named Charles Walcott. He was the one who first realized just how important these fossils were. But the story didn't end with him. Fast forward to the 60s, and the Geological Survey of Canada came in to dig up even more. Then, in the 1990s, the Royal Ontario Museum started these huge, intensive excavations that revealed a world that was, well, it was way stranger than anyone could have possibly imagined.
You gotta understand, this was not an easy place to work. Walcott himself wrote about it, talking about the crazy weather, the brutal terrain, just how tough the geology was. I love his quote here. He called it a delightful uncertainty. Can you imagine? He knew he was on the verge of something huge, but every day was a battle. He was literally at the edge of the known world, in more ways than one.
And look at this. What's so wild is just how small this place is. We're not talking about a huge fossil bed that stretches for miles. No, this whole thing comes from a tiny little patch of rock on one mountainside. But that one spot, the Walcott Quarry, it's given us this perfect, unbelievable window into an entire lost world.
So let's go there. What was this ancient world actually like? I'll tell you this much. The fossils paint a picture of an ocean that was completely, utterly alien. I mean, forget everything you think you know about the ocean today. This was basically a different planet.
Okay, here's a key piece of the puzzle. The word is dysoxic. It just means very low oxygen. See, the oceans back then didn't have nearly as much oxygen as they do today. Life was tough. These creatures were thriving in conditions that would basically suffocate a lot of the animals we have now.
So, why are these fossils so ridiculously well preserved? It all comes down to how they died. It was dramatic. They weren't just gently settling onto the seafloor over time. No, they were caught in these sudden underwater mudslides, what geologists call slurry flows. They were buried instantly in this thick, low-oxygen mud. It's like a geological flash freeze. It stopped decay in its tracks and preserved everything. Not just bones and shells, but soft stuff, guts, gills, even nerves. It's the perfect snapshot. All right, so let's put it all together. You've got a greenhouse world, way warmer than today, way more CO2 in the air. The oceans are struggling for oxygen, and on top of all that, you have these crazy, catastrophic mudslides that bury everything instantly. It's that exact, unique combination of factors that gave us this incredible fossil treasure chest.
Okay, now for the main event, the creatures themselves. And let me tell you, they look like they were dreamed up for a sci-fi movie. These aren't just, slightly different-looking crabs or worms. No, these are like life's first drafts. They're wild evolutionary experiments, testing out all the possible ways an animal could exist.
Just look at this thing. This is Herdia. It was a relative of the famous Anomalocaris, which was basically the T-Rex of the Cambrian seas.
Herdia had this totally bizarre pointed shield on its head, these big grasping claws out front, and a circular mouth that looked kind of like the aperture on a camera. This was a serious predator, actively swimming around and hunting stuff. And the cast of characters just gets weirder and weirder. You've got things like Marella. They called it the lace crab because of its beautiful spiny shell. But the real star of the show, the poster child for Cambrian weirdness, has to be Hallucigenia. I mean, its name literally comes from the word hallucination. For decades, scientists had this thing completely wrong. They thought its legs were tentacles on its back, and its defensive spines were its legs. They had it upside down and backwards. Can you imagine? It turns out, this little guy walked on its spines like tiny stilts, with those tentacle things waving around on its back. This world was a true gallery of nature's weirdest experiments. So what are these things? Well, a lot of them, including our stilt-walking friend Hallucigenia, belong to a huge group called the pawn arthropoda. Now that's a mouthful, but it basically includes all the arthropods you know today. Insects, spiders, crabs, you name it, plus their squishier cousins like velvet worms and water bears. So what we're seeing in the Burgess Shale are the ancient early ancestors of one of the most successful groups of animals on the entire planet.
And here's the real game changer. This explosion of life created the world's very first complex ecosystem. For the first time ever, you had animals that were built to hunt, and other animals that were built to hide. It was a brand new eat or be eaten world. And that simple fact kicked off an evolutionary arms race. Suddenly, you needed armor to protect yourself. You needed complex eyes to spot your next meal, or to spot the thing that wanted to make you its next meal. You needed legs and fins to chase, or to get away. All these things we see in animals today, their origins are right here.
So, what's the big picture here? Why should we care about some weird fossils from a Canadian mountain that are 500 million years old? Well, because this is where we start connecting the dots. This is our story too, our deepest, most ancient history.
All right, here's a really cool concept that helps make sense of all this. Most of these bizarre Burgess Shale creatures, they aren't our direct ancestors. Think of them more like our evolutionary great-aunts and great-uncles. They're part of what's called a stem group. They branched off the family tree right before the last common ancestor of all the living members of that group. That's the crown group. So they aren't our grandparents, but they're close family, and they show us all the wild and crazy experiments evolution was running on the way to creating the animals we see today.
And that right there is the biggest takeaway. These fossils aren't just a collection of weird monsters from some forgotten time. They're prototypes. They're the first drafts for the fundamental body plans, the blueprints that nature has been working with for the last 500 million years. The roots of the entire animal kingdom, and yeah, that includes us, are etched right here in this stone.
And that really leaves you with something to think about, doesn't it? The fact that we have the Burgess Shale at all is just an unbelievable stroke of luck, a 1 in a billion geological snapshot. So it really makes you wonder, what else was out there? What other weird, wonderful, evolutionary experiments played out and were just lost to time? How many other pages are missing from life's first photo album?